Hey everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Mike Gibb. I run accountsrecovery.net, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar on understanding the different types of AI and what they are doing for the ARM industry. Artificial intelligence feels like it's becoming a common term in the ARM industry, just as common and familiar as right party contact or empathy. But just like those other terms, as AI is important, but it's not necessarily as straightforward. There are different types of artificial intelligence, and it's important to know what each type can do. So today in this webinar, which is being sponsored by Skit.ai, we've got a panel of experts here to break down the different types of AI and make sure you know everything you need to know about the technology and what it's doing and can do for the ARM industry. As I mentioned, this webinar is being sponsored by Skit.ai. Skit.ai is the account receivable industry's leading conversational AI company, enabling collection agencies and creditors to streamline and accelerate revenue recovery. Skit.ai's compliant and easy to deploy suite of multi-channel solutions featuring voice, text, email, and chat powered by generative AI delivers seamless and effective consumer interactions at scale, boosting recoveries and elevating consumer experiences. Skit.ai has received several awards and recognitions, including the Stevie Gold winner in 2023 for Most Innovative Company by the International Business Awards, Disruptive Technology of the Year 2022 by CCW, and the Gold Globee CEO Awards 2022. You can learn more by visiting them online at skit.ai, and I'll drop a link in the chat that you can use to click on to visit their website. Let me introduce you now to our panelists. Amit Ombre heads customer success at Skit.ai, pioneering voice AI at scale to revolutionize the accounts and receivables industry. Prior, he held leadership roles in sales technology and consulting, including heading enterprise and telesales at Blackbuck, helping clients drive digital transformation at Oracle, and leading consulting projects for McKinsey & Company across multiple geographies. Lucas Brown is a seasoned analytics consultant with more than 20 years of ARM industry experience. He specializes in applied analytics to optimize consumer engagement and recovery processes. Lucas's analytics, leadership, and consulting experience encompasses work with collection agencies, debt buyers, originators, and AI, ML, and fintech. He's committed to operationalizing data analytics in order to advance capabilities and drive innovation. Porter Heath Morgan is an attorney and advisor who partners with clients to help their compliance and leadership initiatives. Heath is a third-generation collection attorney who has grown up in the industry and has 19 years of in-house counsel experience for collection agencies, collection law firms, debt buyers, healthcare providers, and technology companies. Heath is passionate about training and education and is a frequent speaker for ACA, NCBA, RMAI, and serves on the ACA Council of Delegates, while also being a founding member of the Colorado Creditors Bar Association, where he serves on the board of directors and as its CLE committee chair. Everybody who's watching today is absolutely invited to ask questions and submit comments during the course of our webinar. You can use the chat or the Q&A to submit your questions and comments. If you wish to participate anonymously, there is an anonymous button in the Q&A, and anything we receive from you will be a mystery. Do I need the disclaimer, Heath, or are we good?
I think we're good.
You think we're good?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going with it, so you're on your own. All right, let's jump into our conversation. So, as I mentioned during the introduction, artificial intelligence is a term that is getting thrown around a lot these days. So let's start at the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about what AI is and how it got its start. Lucas, I'm going to pick on you to go first.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mike. Happy to be here. Really, the evolution of AI has been, a long time coming. AI really references, computers mimicking human behavior. So, it's a very broad concept that has many different applications and iterations over the years. You can trace back, linear regression statistics to, 100 years ago, the scientists were really working on those types of approaches. And what we've seen as technology has advanced and math has advanced, we're really seeing more and more ways that we can leverage computers to behave more and more like humans, or make similar, if not better, decisions through various parts of our process. So I really think of AI itself as a very broad concept that has been evolving for a very long time.
No,
Go ahead,
and just
Amit.
to, yeah, no, just to kind of add to it, right? I think what Lucas kind of said, it's been around for, in fact, I'll say thousands of years. You've had regressions, all kind of algorithms. You had the abacus, which probably you can say is probably the first computer, right? And then I think you had an ability to predict things, and maybe it may not be as good as a human, but it was kind of trying to be there, right? So effectively, the intelligence aspect was always there. I think what has really kind of really changed in the last few years has been the computing power at their disposal, right? So effectively, it's both about storage, being able to kind of store that large amount of data. I think there has been obviously development in terms of the transformers and some of those other neural networks and deep learning methods, which has ensured that AI doesn't limit to only processing but also storing information and kind of self-learning as well. And subsequently that has resulted in certain aspects, right? At least in terms of being able to predict text or being able to predict the next action, it being able to be close to what a human can do, right? So effectively, I think that's why I think now some of the use cases where AI can actually come and maybe partially or fully replace a human have started coming in, and that's why the whole buzz around it, right? Versus earlier, it was always limited by how much it can kind of replicate a human.
Yeah, and I think just kind of summarize all that, I think at its core, it is the use of humans and technology to, simulate human cognition, right? And we talked about the history of that, and really where we, to Amit's point, it's just the technology advancements, the computing power that's allowed larger data sets into these fields to perform more functional tasks. And really where I think what's caused this AI explosion in the last year and a half or so is primarily this technology has been used on an enterprise level, where it's IBM Watson's been doing this for 5 years, but a year and a half ago when ChatGPT came out, they basically opened it up to individual consumers and individual people to say, you tell us how you want to use this for anything. And we saw such a rapid adoption to that, with 100 million people using it in the first 2 months, that it really expanded on a lot of companies' plans to focus on just enterprise and businesses to expand it to consumer uses. And that's kind of what we've seen flood our market in the last year, to where we've seen this explosion to where this technology has really been there in a lot of places, but it's now open to individuals for either free or very low prices.
So we talk about GPT. There are obviously other terms that we see used that maybe are used or are tended to be used synonymously with AI. You've got machine learning, ChatGPT, robotic process automation. We've got bots that people are talking about. We talk in the arm industry about chat bots and things like that. So are all of those different types of AI, or is AI included in those? Can we talk a little bit about sort of how AI fits within the context of some of those other terms, Amit?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll start off on this one because it's true. I mean, and one of the important things is the actual clarity of what the technology is and what the definition is. Because with this explosion we've seen on an individual user base, we see lots of marketing about AI technology and what really is AI and what really is just a rules-based technology. That can be very different. So to give my first lawyer answer of the seminar, it depends, Mike. Robotic process automation can use artificial intelligence, or it could be just strictly rules based, right? All of these technologies could be AI or may not be. They may just be sophisticated rules that are followed in process automation. So that's a clear distinction, especially as as I look at, we've got 20 states with proposed AI legislation out there, and some of those definitions of what AI is pretty broad. So I think from a holistic perspective, I say incorporate all of it into the AI conversation. If you're creating an AI policy or AI committee, encompass all of it. And then as you work through it, you can get the details to whether actually it's true, a black box algorithm, generative process, or is it really more of a rules-based process behind it?
And yeah, just to add it, right, I completely agree with Heath. I think artificial intelligence is a very broad term, right? I think it's kind of you can fit all of it in. And I think at the originally artificial intelligence is just meant to be anything which kind of makes machines intelligent, right? Which kind of makes machines kind of replicate how typically humans will think and kind of learn, right? Now, if I talk specifically about machine learning, that's kind of a sub-branch of artificial intelligence where you kind of build algorithms which can be trained and can be used to kind of predict, the next step or the next action, right? So it's kind of a learning kind of a thing. I think that is where it kind of deviates a bit from RPA, right? Because typically RPA in the technical sense of term are more of cases where you kind of code certain processes to kind of replicate in the same unique fashion again and again. An example being, for example, kind of scraping data from a website. Now that's typically something where you can have, it's a process which might be initially done by human who actually types it out onto a Word doc. It can be easily done by creating an RPA and kind of can be used to scrape. Data analysis can be other thing. Now the issue there with RPA is if tomorrow, if I have to basically kind of change the way it's getting done, a human needs to kind of come in and needs to kind of type out a new program, type out a new rules, as Heath was saying, and then, that's how the RPA gets changed. Machine learning, on the other hand, is where I can still keep on feeding it structured data and be able to kind of change the way it kind of behaves and keeps on improving. Now, if I talk about some of this stuff like GPT, etc., these are a further subset of machine learning, which we call as deep learning. Now, within deep learning, obviously, you had neural networks. I think over the course of time, I think around 2017 mark is when, people struck upon transformers, right? Which is like even a much more kind of a intense kind of a deep neural network. And I think the great thing about transformers was the ability that, you did not have to rely on structured data to kind of do it. It could kind of take unlabeled data, come out with the model, and then you could tweak the model, etc., to kind of further fine tune it for what you can do, right? So that's effectively how the whole, the LLMs or the large language models kind of came into the play. GPT, when we talk about it, or GPT-4, which is kind of the recent GPT, it's a kind of an LLM, right? So it's a kind of an LLM created by this entity called as OpenAI, and that's effectively kind of the LLM model which they are using in all their applications, including ChatGPT, which is more of a consumer-facing kind of an interface for that model. Similarly, you have models by other companies like Gemini from Google or Llama from Facebook, etc., which are nothing but a subset of effectively the LLM kind of a space which we are talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, explanation there. I think that just coming back to a couple points that Heath was making as far as thinking about how you want to bring it in and write policies or just think about operationalizing model outputs. A lot of us may think of AI versus decision workflows as two separate things, but really, if we go back to the definition of what AI is, and that's computers mimicking, human behavior, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to say, okay, based on our business experience, based on our collective knowledge that we've gained, we probably already have some simple decisions that we're making in the business that have been proven. If a customer has paid in the past, it's more likely they're going to pay in the future. Things like that, where you're probably going to have a series of decisions that you're already using in your business. And there's going to be similarities between what you've decided are variables that are impactful in your decision workflow and the variables that a machine learning algorithm may pick out as having a high weighting for prediction. And that's not a bad thing. And I think sometimes it is taken as, oh, well, I already know this. I don't need you to tell me that if somebody paid in the past, they're going to pay again. Well, then you start thinking about what is the behavior of somebody who's paid in the past and they owe $5,000? What's somebody who's paid in the past and they owe $20? And, was their previous payment $20 or $5,000? All of these different layers that kind of exist under the single variable and attribute is what we're hoping to capture to really optimize above and beyond what a human is capable of doing, or a traditional decision workflow is able to do. And I think whenever we evaluate these things within our business, I think it's good to categorize the things that are similar. So you can say, we are going to make decisions in the business on these variables no matter what, whether we are using a machine learning algorithm or not. And then where are the areas where we are going to use a model output to make a decision, and really distinctly identify where those cases are, and then measure, are we optimizing the decision by using the machine learning component, or are we doing just as good on our own? And that's a fantastic way to make sure that, the juice is worth the squeeze. If you're going to go into some of these areas, you want to make sure that you're getting additional optimization from leveraging a computer to make the same decision versus a human.
Yeah, and just a couple of points I want to add to Lucas, what you said, right? I think you're perfectly right. It needs to be benchmarked to what you were doing before the algorithm came into play. I think another, maybe two more decision points which might be helpful is the number of parameters, because you talked about the parameters which go into the decision making. Now, effectively, you might be doing an effective decision making with 5 parameters for predicting whether a particular account may be paying. But in reality, there are 25 other parameters or even 100 other parameters which can be fed in. So effectively, once it starts getting into a bigger number, it becomes very difficult and unwieldy for a Excel sheet to kind of manage it. And that's where machine learning comes in. I think the second thing also, in which I think a lot of customers we work with kind of fall short and maybe kind of check out early, is the fact that machine learning has a learning component to it. So effectively, there is also time element to it. So if you kind of compare a machine learning algorithm versus a human on day one, it might be abysmal. But maybe if you compare it 2 months down the line, you will definitely see an improvement, which technically happens at a much faster pace than you can even do it for humans. So effectively, there is also time element on when the comparison should happen. There's also contextual an element which comes in, because you have to pick up context. The machine learning algorithm has to pick up context of the industry or the client or the particular, kind of a subset of accounts as well. So effectively, I think it's important to keep these two factors in mind when you are evaluating as well.
Okay. Let's see here. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. First, is it fair to say that a jumping off point for rules-based versus AI is when the tool is programmed to look for new patterns as opposed to just reacting to predefined patterns?
I think I understand the question and the point there, and I am always an advocate of having a really strong decision tree and rules-based process. As the quick win, that's what you can do. Before you advance from there. Where I think machine learning techniques and other techniques can really play a big role is by exactly doing that and looking for patterns that may not be easily recognized or difficult to evaluate. If you think of working in Excel and evaluating anything, really once you get beyond 2 variables that you're evaluating in a chart or something like that, it gets really messy and difficult to visualize and really identify insights. And that's an opportunity for where a computer algorithm can identify insights that a human may not be able to. So I definitely think it's a great jumping off part to start rules based, and then the goal here is to, again, optimize beyond that. So are you able to feed in data that maybe you haven't evaluated before and say, okay, we have a really strong decision tree, it's working for us, we've proven that it's better than random work effort. are we able to bring in additional variables that maybe we don't know if they're predictive or not. We don't know if they will help us make better decisions. The benefit of being able to train a model is the output of that can give you that distinction and say, oh, I may have fed 10 additional variables into the model. The model output can give you, feature weightings to say, okay, the model has identified these 3 as predictive, and there you just learned not just something that you could consider in your rules-based approach, but then also how the machine learning model can kind of sit on top of that.
Yeah, I think for me, going back to that question, what I would say is that, rules-based processes and technology, you have a predictable, repetitive outcome of expectation, right? Whether that's a pattern you're looking for, but also content, right? Whatever it's generating and content, if you have a predictive format, that more falls in line with a rules-based kind of method. When you get unpredictive, to use Lucas's term, unpredictive responses, unpredictive patterns, unpredictive things. Now, again, even in generative AI, even with ChatGPT, you may have unpredictive output that's coming once you give it a prompt. It has its own system that it's following, but we don't have access to that. So that's kind of where the black box algorithm comes to it, and they probably know more than they're letting on because of the copyright lawsuits out there. But for the most part, where I think AI comes into play is where it's less predictable and repetitive as the same kind of output, whatever that output process is, whether that's an unmanned or manned RPA, or whether it's a true generative AI content, or whether it's conversational AI content as well, where that's where you have the chat bots. I know in other industries there is the airline, I think Air Canada, that their chat bot was saying, we'll give you a free refund. It wasn't following its own policy. It was following a different set of rules, but it was unpredictable, and it wasn't a repetitive response coming from that. And we've also heard stories of chatbots declaring their love for people once they kind of build a connection with them and things like that. That's more of that artificial, unpredictable output. That's kind of where I would land on that question as far as launching off on that.
And just to add to, I think he talked about unpredictable output. I think I'll also put an input lens there, that probably if you're using rules based, and that's how, if I talk about, say, conversational AI, right, which is where we kind of work in, I think it initially started out with a rules based kind of an approach. You had IVR, which were more or less rules based. You had to kind of program a lot of the kind of the IVR flow, and it had to kind of go by the flow. The challenge is customers aren't necessarily, the inputs from the customers when it comes to conversations, for example, is not necessarily in a very predictive fashion, right? So while, and that's why a lot of people ended up finding IVRs pretty cumbersome, right? Now, this is where AI helps, right? Because an AI, once you kind of have an AI-based bot in place, it kind of has the flexibility to handle different kind of utterances which the customers can basically say, and gives it a bit of flexibility. So I think along with the output and predictability, I think another big factor is also how flexible do you want the inputs to be. Like if you want it very flexible, AI is the way to go, because there is obviously a learning mechanism, and it keeps on learning and keeps on improving. Rules-based will kind of limit it, and in terms of the user experience may not be as flexible and as convenient as it is versus AI.
I also think as we, are all kind of overwhelmed, especially recently with all these advancements, I find that humans are probably holding back AI. It's us trying to catch up to all the advancements at this point to really understand what's the best way to have oversight in these processes. What's the best way, whenever you train a collection agent, you can, put them in a classroom, go through a week of class training. You can put them out to listen to collectors' phone calls in a side-by-side. You can listen to their first phone calls, give them live coaching, make sure that they're within guidelines that are appropriate before you kind of release them onto the floor to start jumping on dialer campaigns and things like that. whenever you know, are bringing in, you know, some of these computer-based tools, it empowers you to be able to make way more decisions and faster. And that can create some anxiety behind, okay, what's really happening out there? What is my best approach, to make sure that, you know, if I am using generative AI or if I am making predictions, how do I know that that I have some oversight there and that I can identify trends that are going the wrong direction, you know, quickly, and then what do I do about them? Do I retrain? You know, do I have a partner I can retrain the model with? How do I kind of address anything that comes up? Because, you know, as fast as a model can move, it may take you, you know, a day or two to perform analysis. By that time, you know, many more decisions have been made. So what is the right balance between oversight and how you implement some of these things, and how you make sure that you're testing persistently to identify, you know, any drift or slippage in the accuracy of what you're using?
All right, another question here. Amit, for you, I think, Heath, we may have to go to the disclaimer at this point, based on the question, so let me know. But with the newest FCC language stating that AI bots are considered pre-recorded, how does this work with compliance when using Skit.ai or any other type of AI bots with outbound calls specifically? Do they technically have express prior consent? Do we need to get this consent?
Yeah, so I think I'll put in a disclaimer here that I'm no legal expert. I'll just probably kind of say based on the experiences we have had with
Even
our
if you
customers.
are a legal expert, this is not legal advice.
Yeah, right, but I'm not, so that makes it even worse. Right. So I think broadly, I think one thing which is very clear, right, and this is when we have spoken to almost the 70 plus agencies that we are working with. I think what it specifically, in fact, it doesn't say that AI bots are considered pre-recorded. It explicitly states what artificial intelligence is, which is any kind of computer generated, kind of a bot, right? Or computer generated kind of content, which is given on a call. I think what it states is you can use it as long as you have a prior express consent based on whatever is the TCPA kind of regulations, right? So typically, I think across the customers that we have worked with, I think this is something which we have been very kind of open. And I think we leave the interpretation of what exactly is prior express consent, based on the TCPA ruling to the customer as well as the general council, the council that they are kind of working with. But broadly, I think it's very clear that you need this to be able to use AI to kind of call this thing, right? Now, we have had instances where, for example, people may not have AI or artificial intelligence in the consent language, but they do have pre-recorded. So there, what we have done is we have made some changes in the flow to be able to kind of take consent on the call using a pre-recorded prompt, and only if the customer approves and explicitly agrees to kind of interacting with an AI bot, that's only we kind of activate our AI bot into play. Beyond that, also what the TCPA ruling is the FCC ruling is very clear is, I think this is explicitly for outbound. Inbound is a place where you can still use AI. So we have an inbound bot as well. We also have SMS, two-way SMS bots as well as email as well, which are again all based on Gen AI technology. So effectively, that is something which we can still continue using, and you can kind of figure out ways and means by kind of driving some of the inbound traffic and keep on utilizing the AI tools which are there at the disposal, right? So I think to kind of summarize, you need consent, you need prior express consent to use AI on the outbound. But I think the good part is on the inbound side, you're free to use it on SMS as well as email. Also are additional channels which you can utilize if you have a consent for those as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think to that point, I mean, the ruling's pretty clear. It pertains to outbound calls. And I think, big picture, if I were to add anything to what Amit said, I would say that, this ruling was not focused on the debt collection industry. And so there certainly are workarounds, as Amit mentioned, but it is broad enough, and we are covered in the TCPA. So we definitely have to, comply with that. But the reason I mentioned that it's not targeted at us is because it was targeted at political robocalls, right? This was an artificial Joe Biden voice that was telling voters to stay home that the FCC reacted so quickly to. There also certainly are AI generated scammers out there trying to scam people out of it, out of money or out of their information or whatever. And that's really the focus of it. Now, we get caught up in that because of the TCPA, but I think as time goes on, and as the Skit.ai's of the world and other companies in the world evolve, and we start to have thousands and then hundreds of thousands and then millions of minutes where consumers may express a preference to talk to a bot versus a human, there may be an opportunity for some additional carve outs in our industry later on, especially if consumers prefer that. And let's be real, as we're talking about the scope of AI, by the end of this year, we're going to have pretty mainstream consumer chatbots chatting with either your agents or your inbound conversational AI. So maybe they're less offended if it's their own bot using that moving forward. But I mean, for now, as Amit mentioned, I think the ruling was about as clear as it can be that for outbound calls, the TCPA applies, and both components of that, having that pre-recorded artificial voice and message does require that express consent. And I think it's TCPA consent. I don't think it has to be for AI voice, but some sort of consent has to be there for outbound calls.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Another question from the audience. In terms of agent reporting, would AI as a third-party application be able to take information from multiple collection systems and compile it into a single report and or multiple for each campaign? Is there a reporting system such as this yet?
So I'll jump in here because I think, I don't even know that you need AI in the definition that we've talked about. You could just do that through process automation, right? There are bots right now that are already in the industry that are taking data sets from different systems, transcribing it. I mean, there's even AI that can read, PDF documents, right? So, I mean, we're seeing data extracted through all kinds of different software systems all the time. All you need is a process built out that a human shows you how to do it, and that AI can, or artificial intelligence or robotic process automation can automate for you. So yeah, I mean, I don't even know if you need AI to do that. You can just do that through process automation now.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of low code, no code options for things like that now. In the past, you would have to have a data engineer who's going to, code to each of these different types of, places, systems where the data may be. And, there's tons of tools that may or may not include AI today that could be leveraged, for that. But I really think what you're wanting to do there is build out a data pipeline with the least amount of engineering effort possible. And yes, that can definitely be done today.
Another question from the audience. What are the panel's thoughts on using AI, such as ChatGPT, to analyze and assist with responses to written complaints?
Should I go first on that one?
Definitely.
Yeah. So we haven't talked about that. Obviously, with the use of any kind of AI technology, there's safeguards that need to be installed in them. And one of the fundamental safeguards is, the dissemination of confidential consumer PII information. So if you're going to use a technology like a ChatGPT that, I mean, you can pay for some privacy, but you are essentially disclosing information to a third party. You don't have the right to delete that information. You don't have the right to control that. So you would want to be very limited in any kind of PHI or PII that you are using with that. Now, if you are redacting that information or just putting the content of the complaint in there and asking for a response, I think that's fine to get a first draft back. again, the responses that you get back from ChatGPT and any kind of, generative GPT, whether it's an enterprise one like ChatGPT, or if you want to use an internal one within your own documents, that's been happening more and more nowadays. You still want to have a human edit that and make sure it's correct, because it can still be prone to hallucinations. It could still offer a refund to a consumer. You don't want to copy and paste that response if it's offering a refund and offering to pay their medical bills for them, right? So you want to, to have those safeguards in place. But if you're using it as a tool in that process, there should be no reason you couldn't do that.
Yeah, and that's a really good thing to remember about ChatGPT in general is any inputs that you put in there, you're sharing the data, and you might as well assume it's public. Because whatever words or information, whether it's PII or proprietary information, that is going to go into a database somewhere, and you essentially are giving up control of that data, which could cause many different types of challenges.
Yeah, but yeah, as I think as he said, definitely it's something, you'll need a man, like some manpower to kind of assist and supervise and review it, right? But I think it's definitely something which you can use to kind of streamline and make the process more efficient, right? So
Yeah,
it's something
you could copy and paste, 100 disputes or complaints at one time, get
yes.
100 different responses, and then go
Yeah.
through and edit that, right? There's still efficiencies to be had. You just need to have a human review those responses.
Yes.
I think if you're brainstorming anything, whether it's a discussion you want to have, or even preparing for something like this, or writing a document, I would encourage everybody to try to, even if it's just the free ChatGPT account or something like that, use the large language models to make suggestions, begin interacting with them, but make sure that you have lots of oversight. You're not putting anything in there that you wouldn't want to share outside your walls. But I think that they're really helpful tools and could really help you communicate better, whether it's internally or externally, as long as you're following those steps.
I think a better way, and that's something which we are kind of using internally as well, because, you have limitations with ChatGPT on the fact that I think there is obviously the PI data and the fact that it's publicly there. So I think, obviously, if you're doing it at scale, and I'm talking about some of the larger agencies out there, it probably, if this is an activity which involves like 10 or 20 people, it might make sense to kind of build your own foundational model, train and fine tune it, even have like a kind of a monitoring algorithm in place as well to kind of monitor those responses, do some reinforced learning over there as well, and kind of actually create a model to be able to do it much more accurately. But again, I think at the end of the day, as with any technology, it finally comes down to input versus output, right? Like what are the costs, or what are the kind of efforts which are going in versus, what you're saving at the end. If it at scale it's worth it, I think makes sense to kind of build it ground up. If it's not, then just use ChatGPT just to drive some of the efficiencies, as long as, the data confidentiality things are kind of kept under control.
Yeah, it's great points.
All right, excuse me. So we've been talking about this for 40 minutes now, and I wrote this question down a while ago, so it might not still be relevant anymore. But to me, an average, non-technical, non-IT person, do I really care what type of AI is being used in whatever tool I'm using? At the end of the day, from my perspective, or for the average user in the arm industry, is it going to matter?
I think the moment that it matters to you is whenever you're forced to explain what you're doing, and that's going to happen all the time in this industry. And I think explainability is a really important consideration, depending upon how you're using AI and what type of AI you're using. If you are doing something to change work efforts, making a decision on how many phone calls somebody's going to receive or what type of settlement offers or payment plans somebody's going to receive. You're going to want to make sure that there's no way the model is, for example, looking at the person's age, the person's sex, all of the PII information that you really want to make sure that there's de-identified data kind of feeding into those types of decisions. So I think it really matters it's important to think about how you may be creating bias in your work efforts and how you want to make sure that you have explainability and oversight around each of those components.
Yeah, it does, Mike, and that may have been a softball question because it absolutely does matter. Especially if you're looking at your internal organization and how you're setting up adoption of AI technology, right? It's an AI policy, it's an AI committee, and it's really an AI risk assessment of assessing the different technology types. Because especially if you're going to be investing in a technology and spending money, you're going to want to make sure that it's not, if I go back a step here, like when I look at overview of AI technology. I look at it with 3 different lenses. I look at it internally. How are you and your vendors going to use this technology? How are governments going to regulate this? The regulatory entities going to regulate that? And then how are consumers going to use that? And the consumer use is going to come, it's going to push how we adopt this. But we can't forget the middle part, which is the regulatory issues, because you don't want to invest in a technology and spend $100K on something that gets deemed to be illegal in a year or two, right? I mean, this is rapidly changing stuff here, and when I talk to clients and have this conversations about this, it's really finding that looking at what guidelines are out there right now. The EU AI Act just passed. That's a great one to look at. Look at what the CFPB's put out there, and really find kind of a safe playground to explore AI technology. And so, as you're vetting what to use, you want to make sure it's in that safe, that safe playground that won't be regulated out of business in 1 or 2 years. So, you want to take less risk adverse, adoption of this technology. And, there's certainly ways to do that, but, you want to look at so you want to understand how the data is going to be used, how it's being generated, right? I think there's a clear preference for more, rules-based is a much safer playground than the black box algorithm, right? As Lucas mentioned, explainability. That they outline transparency. That's the fundamental point of the EU AI Act, and then also and some of the CFPB publications, because it's not that hard of a reach to go in our industry to see regulatory investigations, regulatory inquiries, both on a federal, the CFPB level, and a state level, FCC as well on a federal level, asking you to produce your prompts, to produce your logs, to produce your scripts about this. To if there is an errant outcome, you want to have transparency to show, hey, we're not doing this to harm or defraud the consumer. And if your vendor or the company you're looking at can't explain that to you, then it may be worth looking at a different vendor. So yeah, that question about does it matter? Yeah, it absolutely matters, especially in the ARM collection space.
Okay. I'm trying to figure. I got 2 questions, and we don't have a lot of time. I'm trying to figure out which one.
You want to talk about types of technology before we get out of here?
Sure.
Okay. So I'll start with that. I brought it up here, but I kind of categorize 4 types of technology, AI technology that's being used in our space and being used in different ways. And I do go back to the ultimate question is, does it improve people? Does it improve process? Does it improve profit? And what you want to solve for which of those problems will depend on what kind of technology you're using. But I look at it as data monetization. How we're going to maximize the value of the data that we're collecting, and data collection comes into that. And then as far as AI goes, it's going to be generative AI, robotic process automation, and conversational AI. Those are like the four big categories of where we're seeing a lot of adoption and a lot of impact in our space. So that's kind of high level. I'll let Lucas and Amit kind of dive into some of the details about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of categories. I think I've spent most of a lot of my time and focus is in the data monetization and data capture, and and those are the spaces where you're really going to build out your predictive analytics for predicting how to organize your outreach, how to what accounts you're going to spend money on, what accounts you're going to have a skilled collector talk to, all those types of things. And I think within there, the components of technology versus kind of efforts towards infrastructure and setting yourself up for success is different in each of those. Because whenever you're talking about a lot of the machine learning and predictive analytics that are used for servicing optimization, you really need to make sure that you understand you're going to need a vast behavior set of data to be able to look at all the different types of consumer behavior within interacting directly with your company, and to be able to think about the data first, even before you start thinking about how are we going to build a model. You can do 50% or more of the work on becoming successful by just focusing on, are you capturing the data that goes by you every day? Do you have vendor files that are just kind of on the factory floor and not ingested into your data warehouse? Are there opportunities today to find data that you're getting, but you're not able to visualize it? Getting those all into the right spot, I think, is really imperative for that area. So don't just think about, okay, I'm ready to get into AI, let's build a model and let's go. Understanding the components to success for each of those types that Heath mentioned is really important.
Sure. I think I like the framework which you talked about, Heath: profit, process, and people. I think that's kind of the right way to look at it. I think if I look on the profit side, I think there are multiple ways in which agencies can use it. I think when you talk about profit, it's either maximizing collections, if I kind of put it very bluntly, or it's about minimizing the cost. In agency, when you talk about cost, it's mostly people, right? I think AI is a fantastic means to kind of automate either partial or full of your process, to kind of ensure that you either kind of reach more accounts in the same amount of time, or you are able to kind of probably reach the same number of account but with reduced workforce, right? And I think a lot of people kind of talk about reduced workforce from a negative lens, but I think in reality what we have seen with a lot of agencies that we work with is it actually frees up people to kind of go and capture new accounts. It frees up people. For example, we are working with some creditors where it's freeing up the workforce to kind of go and service some of those loans better, right? Which is something which they were lacking earlier, because there was always a greater preference for collecting money. So effectively, I think that's kind of one lens where you can use conversational AI, you can automate the process, use different channels, you can use voice, you can use text, you can use email, or you can use voicemails to kind of go out there and kind of reduce the reliance on agents, especially for some of the mundane, the initial kind of workflows, typically in terms of a loan collection call. The second thing on the profits is, the predictability, which I think, Lucas, you mentioned, right? So I think you had scoring models earlier. The good thing is with, more complicated kind of machine learning algorithms, you can kind of start fitting in more and more parameters over there. You can use ways and, different inputs, which are more spend and consumer driven, like, because a lot of the scoring which we have seen out there in the industry, it's a bit dated, because it kind of is reliant on your credit score, etc., demographics, which may be material to when you have taken the loan, not to your current state of affairs, right? On the other hand, you can kind of start feeding in some live data, etc., which can start feeding into the model in terms of whether you're buying something or whether you are employed or unemployed at this point, and which can result in a much better kind of a prediction model, which obviously has a implication on your profits. I think when we talk about the people part, I think training and development is one big avenue where AI can be useful, right? So effectively, whether it be kind of prompting agents to kind of be much aligned with your script, or even kind of training them, kind of synthesizing some of the stuff which I think is being which is there in those conversations, and kind of giving inputs. That's one great way by which you can kind of leverage AI. Finally, when it comes down to processes, I think there are so many tasks, whether it be administration. We just talked about using ChatGPT to analyze complaints. I think there are a lot of regulatory and compliance related tasks which also kind of agencies have to do. There are obviously certain admin tasks which they have to do. There is a lot of avenues of kind of automating, kind of figuring out those tasks, kind of figuring out what is the best way to kind of leverage any of these tools to kind of do it. And the last and final thing is, I think, a lot of the agencies which we have worked with, one of the things which they've been struggling for, especially the smaller ones, is a lack of enough IT support. They're always kind of dependent on external IT vendors. I think with a lot of the low code and no code technologies driven by Gen AI, there is a chance to kind of use any layman who has very limited access to the technology to at least kind of build the initial code and build kind of the initial solution, and then kind of leverage maybe external expertise to just kind of keep on improving on it. So I think, yeah, across profit people and processes, I think there are loads of avenue where AI can be used to kind of drive a great impact.
Yeah, I think that's good. Good color on all that. Because we've seen hundreds of use cases now in the industry where conversational AI is used again to drive revenue, to drive reduction of cost, or even just to replace the staffing issues. To have that, if it's a problem of hiring people, that's a supplement for that. And then same thing with RPA. We're seeing that reduce FTE hours, and really automate a lot of processes, improve accuracy for things. And then we're all you can also use it for cost reduction. I mean, we're seeing it save lots of time with e-filing for litigation. We're seeing it now emailing, being able to do your email outbound campaigns and save your letter costs. There's a lot of value there. And then I say on generative AI, we're mostly seeing it for the compliance side, as Amit mentioned, where but really most of your departments and your companies have projects or have content, either policies, procedures, work instructions that they know they need to document, that they haven't gotten around to it because it's urgent, but it's not important, or it's important but not urgent, rather. And so it just gets put off. Like, we'll review it, our annual review, we'll do it next time, we'll do it next time. But if you can use a first draft generator to help create that content, you can get a lot of, get a lot of value savings on the FTE hours of actually getting those projects done. And then now that we're getting to, GPT 2.0 or LLM 2.0, where companies are taking their own internal policies and procedures and making their own internal chatbots for IT support, for compliance questions, for HR, you're also seeing a reduction of time of those staff who answer the same questions over and over again. So there's really a multiple uses across the spectrum for all of those different technology types. And really, there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of savings. And what I really like about a lot of this is that even we talk about how this technology has been around for a while. It has been pretty pricey, but I think since the emergence of ChatGPT, which was free, right, it's caused a lot of innovators out there to drop their prices to catch on to this adoption rate. And so we've seen this technology even be affordable for smaller agencies, mid-sized agencies, as well as large agencies too.
A couple of minutes left before we wrap up. How much better is a collection agency that's using AI doing right now versus one that isn't?
So I think I can, because I think that's something which we have been involved with for quite some time. So I don't think I'll put a number to it. I think probably because I think it depends on a lot of circumstances. I think I'll probably just break it down into probably 3 different categories, right? I think the first category is the one is a kind of agency where penetration is a problem, right? They have not been able to penetrate the accounts. I think the good thing about AI, and I'm talking specifically about conversational AI, has been the fact that it can kind of ramp up the scale and improve penetration. So effectively, we have seen agencies where almost 70 to 80% of their account inventory was left untouched, and the agents were just focusing on the top 20% of agencies. We have seen them being able to exploit that 80% inventory and be able to kind of bump up their collection rates by almost 30 to 40% versus what they were doing earlier, right? The second thing I think is in terms of automating, right? So you have inbound kind of a bots. So you have certain cases, etc., where we have non-working hours, for example, where agents were not available and you were kind of missing out on chance to kind of get payments or even being able to service the customers or calling in. Kind of putting in the bot, you effectively have 8 hours more of operations, and that has a massive impact in terms of driving benefits. I think the third part, I think where we have seen massive impact. I talked about the scoring strategy, right? As well as kind of being able to put in more additional parameters and be able to drive decisions, not just around whom to contact, but how to contact, which is the mode which we need to use, or which is any particular agent we need to use, right? Based on some of those parameters, we have seen that there is a greater predictability in terms of payments, and that has resulted in almost a 10 to 20% kind of a bump in terms of collections. So broadly, I think easily, I think it has an impact both in terms of kind of driving up the top line as well as driving efficiencies on the bottom line as well, without compromising much in terms of the quality of service which we're providing to the customers.
I think that based on what I see out there, it's just as much about the cultural adoption and shift necessary within your organization as it is about the tool set itself. So adopting AI sincerely, the differences that you'll find between an agency that's doing that and an agency that's not, I think, is really adopting a scientific culture. And all of us, at least myself, I'll say, you're kind of came up in the career. The way you get promoted is by being the expert and knowing the best answer. So it's like hard to let go of that if you're counted on to be the expert and to be the one who always has the best decision. It's hard to let go of that and say, okay, now machine's going to help me make the decision instead of just my own gut instinct and experience. So, being able to make that shift to a scientific approach where you are kind of testing your notions, testing what you think is the right path, but always being a healthy skeptic, I think is really important. And if you're able to do that within your organization, I think the benefits are you're able, when something new happens, whether it's a new project that you get, whether consumer behavior is shifting, you're gonna figure that out faster than everybody else, and you're gonna be able to make changes within your organization to address them faster. So you're gonna figure out how to work that new business better, faster, and you're also going to be able to identify consumer behavior drift and be on top of it and make changes within your organization faster, which I think are all attributes to full AI adoption.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lucas, because your employees, right? We don't want them to be afraid of AI taking their jobs. There's a lot of articles about that, right?
Right.
We want to have that mindset that we are curious, we're going to adopt this, and the AI is going to be a digital assistant for you. It's going to do the mundane, repetitive task. You're going to actually upskill your human employees. They're going to be coworkers with the AI, and they're going to, check the work and make decisions based off the data that the automation and AI gives you, right? So it really is that co-working environment. And then I think to the other point I would say about being intentional about this technology is that, it's not a matter of are we going to adopt this technology or are we going to go away from it? No, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And we're seeing in the last year, since ChatGPT has come out and since the explosion of AI, we've seen Zoom update its terms and conditions to include AI. We've been Adobe, Microsoft Copilot, Google Sheets, all of these companies, all the software that you're using right now already, Outlook has AI built into it, the Copilot, right? It's being forced on you, one, by your larger vendors that you're probably paying for right now, Two, it's going to be forced on you by consumers, because consumers are going to want to have that interaction with the chatbot versus a human, or they're going to bring their own chatbots to their own debt resolution chatbots, their own they're outsourcing that already, and they're going to be doing it more and more. iOS 18, when that comes out, that's going to have a ChatGPT kind of function built into it. And that's kind of where I think we'll start seeing the really emergence of consumer resolution agents or bots, whatever you want to call it. Mike and I have talked about this before. There was an article about a month ago, and I know we got to go, but I'll be quick here, where a man in Russia used a chatbot on Tinder to date 5,000 women. Tinder is an addictive app. It's supposed to keep you on there. If you're going to outsource that, they're absolutely going to be outsourcing their debt collection experiences onto chatbots. So that part is coming. So even if you said we don't want to use this, you've got to have that mindset that this is going to become part of our life in the next year, next 5 years, and we need to have a plan to adopt for it.
Just hope consumers get as lucky as that guy did.
Let's hope the consumers listen to the guy who proposed to a woman the chatbot recommended. And when the chatbot says, pay your debt.
That's right. We are unfortunately out of time, so we'll just go around the panel quick, and I'll ask each of you to share what you think the most important takeaway is from our conversation before we wrap up. Amit, we'll start with you.
I think AI has been rapidly evolving, and it's going to even evolve much more rapidly. I think there is already talks of GPT 5.0 kind of coming out very soon, right? So effectively, I think, and every iteration is going to kind of improve the technology, the capability of the bot by leaps and bounds. So I think it's very important that, every agency, vendor, every company out there latches onto it, kind of figures out and configures what kind of AI technology will work best for them across different processes within, the kind of boundaries of compliance, and, just kind of continue the learning algorithm internally as well to kind of make the best use of it.
I agree. I think it's about there's a large spectrum of what you can do. Some of those require much more organizational change and investment than others. I think find a soft spot where there's opportunity and easy adoption and low cost to try it out and start using some AI in your business, and then double down from there.
Yeah, one quick point. I know we're out of time here. You're going to be using AI technology either intentionally or unintentionally. What I mean by that is, if you don't have an AI policy already, you could have employees and vendors using AI without your knowledge. Do you want to let that go unregulated, or do you want to have a policy that kind of dictates how employees can be using this? And that's kind of, again, the importance of being intentional about this and creating an AI policy for your company.
Excellent. Well, Keith, Amit, Lucas, I want to thank each of you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us today and share your insights into AI and what it is and how it's working and how it's revolutionizing the arm industry. So on behalf of everybody who watched and listened, thank you so much for being here. Amit, I want to thank you and the team at Skit.ai one last time for sponsoring today's webinar. Everyone, please check them out at Skit.ai. To those of you who are watching and listening, thank you for giving us your time. Hope you found this to be worthwhile. If you're watching us live, we're back tomorrow with a webinar at 1 o'clock Eastern on developing your companies and the industry's future leaders. If you haven't signed up for that yet, there's a link in the chat, or you can go to accountrecovery.net and sign up. So we hope to see you back for that tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Until then, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much for being here, and we look forward to seeing everybody soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.